What is going on, everybody? In today's video, I wanted to try to bring back a little bit of nostalgia for you guys. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 different places that are incredibly nostalgic to not only me, but probably a lot of the old school players out there. I started playing RuneScape about 20 years ago, I guess now it's been. That is just sounds ridiculous coming out of my mouth that I've been playing this game for 20 years. But fortunately enough for me, I was able to turn it into something more, making videos, content for all you guys. But even when I look back and think about these places that I'm going to mention in this video, it still brings back a lot of memories and, the time I was at in my life. And I would also like to know if there are certain places like this to you guys that bring back these kind of memories. So if you can, I do like to read the comments on these videos, so leave it down below. I'll do my best to respond to what I can. Before we get started with our trip down memory lane, you are not going to want to skip this video ad. Black Friday sale at eWin Racing, up to 30% off with my code AsukaYen, and that does include the all-new redesigned Champion and Flash XL series chairs. I'm the proud owner myself of a Champion Series chair, and let me tell you, it is the most comfortable gaming chair that I have ever had the pleasure of sitting in, and that is due to the Cold Cure memory foam that goes into every single chair. Just for another couple of great features of the chair, the 4D integrated lumbar support, adjustable so you can make that chair fit directly to you for maximum comfortability. Is that even a word? I don't know. Additionally, you'll also get the snap-on, snap-off magnetic head pillow. The armrests are also magnetic, and one of my favorite features is the hubless casters, allowing you to roll around on any surface. They're also great if you are on a hard surface, won't scratch your nice floors. So, if you are looking to get yourself a nice Christmas gift, or one of your best gaming friends, your significant other, even your grandma, who knows? Use code AsukaYen, links in the description below, up to 30% off eWin Racing products for the Black Friday sale. Alright, let's get started with this trip down memory lane. I want to preface this by saying this is not like the top 5 most nostalgic old school RuneScape locations. No, these are in no particular order, and these are just 5 places that come to mind and trigger a little bit of nostalgia anytime I pass through the area. And the first one I want to start out with is going to be the Flax Fields in Sears Village. Now, the Flax Field in Sears Village is particularly special to me in old school RuneScape because it's where I've made my first stack of 1 million GP. Now, back in the day, money wasn't abundant like it is now. You can go to Vorkath for a whole day and leave with, possibly millions of GP. But back then, it really had to be made. You had to spend time doing it. PVM drops weren't like they are today. There were other ways that you actually had to make money, and spinning flax into bowstrings was one of those things for me. Now, at the current time in the game, you can actually make quite a bit of profit by spinning flax with the flax spell on the Lunar Spellbook. You make around 400,000 GP per hour, and even just spinning flax to bowstrings now, you can still make somewhere around 200,000 GP per hour. Now, back then, it wasn't nearly as much as that. You were maybe looking at about half of that, 3/4 to half of that, when you're making the profit, because you had to start out, down at the flax field. You pick your inventory, run up towards the bank, and then take a little detour off into that little house there with the spinning wheel up on the 2nd floor. You'd spin your flax and then you'd go bank it. You could probably see 100 to 150k an hour back then just spinning flax and then selling the bowstrings. Now, the thing about today is flax is just it's not worth anything. It's 1-2 GP on the Grand Exchange. Back then, you could actually just pick the flax and sell it for about half the cost of a bowstring if you didn't want to be bothered with actually spinning the bowstrings, which was pretty profitable in and of itself. Now, just like money and income not being as abundant as it is nowadays, neither were supplies and stuff that you needed for skilling. So all of this stuff had to be made by players, which bowstrings still have to be made by players because they don't just spawn anywhere. Monsters don't drop an abundant resource of them. So these flax that are spun into bowstrings nowadays still have to be spun using Dispel or old-fashioned way on a wheel, which the wheel in the Lumbridge Castle actually makes it a lot easier now because it's on the floor right below the Lumbridge Castle bank. But again, back in the day, a little bit harder to come by, a little bit slower money making, but it was never a bad time. There was always tons of people picking flax, and you'd go up, have conversations with people while they were spinning their bowstrings. Your conversation would get on pause, and then when you were back up there, wherever you see the person again, the conversation restarted. It was just a different era back then. The next place on my list is the Fire Giants inside the Backstorian Falls. Now, this place was pretty fun. There were always people here, and by God, you were always fighting for a spot to AFK range some Fire Giants. And you know what the worst was is when you had a range level that was a little low, so you had your stacks of arrows showing up on the ground, and somebody would just come right in and snipe your pile of arrows before you could go pick them up. Well, that kind of sucked, and you'd lose a lot of arrows that way, but hey, that's the way it was. Fire Giants were really popular for a good while underneath of the waterfall just because of your ability to stand back in a crevice, and you could just range them from a distance, and everybody was after that elusive rune scimitar, which we know now is a drop rate at the Fire Giants of 1 in 128. But back then, we didn't have the old school RuneScape wiki. We didn't have them putting out drop rates for everything. So everybody's out there hunting rune scimitars from the Fire Giants, or maybe a Fire Battle Staff, and you know, back then they were worth a bit more than they were. If I remember correctly, you could sell a rune scimitar for 30 to 40,000 GP, and while getting some AFK range XP, well, that wasn't too bad of a haul. The Fire Giants in the Backstorian Falls was just an incredible place at the time to get some ranging experience. I cannot tell you how long I spent there, how many range levels, how much range experience I got there, and I did make quite a few friends actually along the way, because there was a couple spots in there you could stand, range some Fire Giants. You could just have conversations with people for hours on end while you're just shooting away at a Fire Giant that is defenseless and cannot get to you. My next one is Lumbridge. There is not a single RuneScape player out there that does not remember Lumbridge and this music. Yep, as soon as you started the game fresh off of Tutorial Island, it dropped you right in front of Lumbridge Castle, and maybe it's a little nostalgic to you because you died and lost all your stuff, and boom, back to Lumby you went. So way back then, there was no Death's Gravestone or anything. If you died, you had about 90 seconds to get back to your stuff and try to pick it up. And if you were farther away from that, well, it was popping up to other players. They were looting it and it was gone. Unless you found that really nice person that might have given it back to you. So maybe some people remember Lumbridge a little differently than I do. But regardless, it is where every RuneScape player started their old school RuneScape journey, got hooked on the game, and then just kind of spiraled out of control. And now you have something like 530 days played, but we're not going to talk about that. Anyways, Lumbridge, every time I go there for a clue scroll or just to teleport there, or for whatever reason, it's just always triggers that little memory in the back of my head. Like, this is where you started, and this is pretty much what created your existential crisis of RuneScape that we know today. Before the Grand Exchange, we had Fido Park. God, who remembers Fido Park? Fido Park was the trading hub of old school RuneScape. Back in the day, it was World 2, and good luck getting into that world at peak playing times. 2,000 people was the limit to a world. It still is, but it was super hard to get into Fido World 2 to sell some stuff. Now with the Grand Exchange today, it makes merching a whole lot easier, but way back then, you had to stand there and there was no auto type feature. You had to keep typing in every single time whatever you were trying to sell. Now I used to do a lot of merching back in the day, but it just doesn't seem to be something that interests me nowadays. My most nostalgic merching thing was selling the God Rune Armor sets that you got from Clue Scrolls. I remember the first one I ever bought and sold. It was a set of Guthix Rune Armor. It was the one with the green stuff on it. the green trim. I sold it for 3,500k, 3.5 million GP, and I ended up buying it from a guy for 3.1 million GP, so I thought I was big ballin' with that 400k profit. Now, I spent a lot of time doing some merching, whether it was party hats back in the day, those kind of sets, or, you know, anything else that I could get my hands on and think that I made a profit. But I really think back then it really helped with player interaction. Actually, it was player interaction. You had to buy and sell everything through players before the grand exchange, and it was just much more fun time when you were a mercher or you just decided to try to make some money that way. You actually had to interact with your fellow players, and it was just a bartering system. It was, yes, that's too much, no, not enough, and then you agree on something and make the trade. It took me a lot of time to build up a bank that way, but let me tell you, I think it was one of the things that I most fondly remember from RuneScape way back then. Now, I could honestly sit around and make a video all day about different nostalgic spots in old school RuneScape, but for everybody's viewing pleasure and to keep this video at a normal viewing length that will retain everyone's attention, this is going to be my last one. And the last one for me is the Catherby fishing spots over there on the shores. And this place was just great because there was so much player interaction, lots of chats going on all the time. And the place was always packed. You know, this was the place to fish before you got the fishing level high enough to get into the fishing guild. Now, I actually stayed there quite a bit after I was able to enter the fishing guild, just because I enjoyed the interaction with players. I like talking to people, you know, seeing what people were up to. And if you always logged into the same world every day, it was always the same people that were there at the same time. Some of them made it to the friends list, some of them didn't, but that is all ancient history. You would go here, you'd catch all your fish, and then you'd run over to the range right next to the Catherby bank, cook all your fish, throw them in the bank, and then back you went. Now, fishing was just a great AFK activity for me back then, especially while I was still in school. It was something you could do while you do your homework, still carry on a conversation with your fellow players, make a little bit of money while you were at it. I had a few other places that were in the running to go into this video, but just because of the player interaction, this is the last one that made my list. So that's going to do it, everybody. I hope that this video triggered some ancient memories that may be in the back of your brain in there that really might remind you why you're still playing this game today. As I mentioned before, if you have those nostalgic places that you really remember, I'd like to hear your stories. Leave them in the comments below. I'll try to respond to what I can. Also, don't forget, Black Friday, you win racing 30% off using my code AsukaYen. You can find the links in the description below to take you over there. Do not forget to put that code in at checkout to get your 30% off. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up down below. And if you haven't done so yet, tap that subscribe button on your way out. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.